We're still a few months away from Wisconsin's primary election, but Wisconsinites are already forming their opinion on the Democratic candidates as well as the ongoing impeachment inquiry.
Joining us now to talk about the results of the latest poll is the director of the Marquette Law School poll, Charles Franklin. Hi,
Welcome
Charles.
back.
Good to
Good to
see
be
you.
here.
So when did you conduct this poll?
So we were in the field Wednesday through Sunday last week. Wednesday was the day that public testimony on impeachment began. So our first interviews were after the first afternoon's or day's public testimony. But of course, then we didn't get anything from this week's testimony. So it's just the beginning of last week's testimony.
But the testimony had begun.
It had begun, but hadn't been finished, and we were interviewing people throughout that period. So some had heard more, some had heard less.
So what did your numbers show?
Well, what we saw is a little bit of a decline in support for impeachment and removal. Last month it was 44% in favor. This month it's 40% in favor of impeaching and removing the president, and just over 50%, 53% opposed. But where that's coming from is substantially Republicans rallying behind the president, something that is a phenomenon we saw in the recall here in 2012, and we see it now. It's not a lot of movement. It's from 4 to 6 points more supportive of the president. What's more surprising is we didn't see Democrats rally in the opposite direction, rally in favor of impeachment. Part of that may be that they had already bumped up in support in the October data, because that was when Nancy Pelosi had announced the impeachment hearings, and Democrats really moved in favor in that October data compared to where they'd been in April. The net effect of that is Democrats were a little bit less supportive of impeachment. Republicans were more opposed to impeachment. The net effect is this 4 percentage point change. Now, what's critical, though, is this week's testimony is the further evidence, and we'll really want to watch national polling as well as our polls to see what the full set of testimony does to public opinion on what happened and what should be done about it.
This was impeachment and removal.
Yes, we deliberately ask it that way. Other polling has found that there's really not much difference between being for impeachment and also being for removal. And since, as a practical matter, that's where we are, we didn't ask about the first step of impeachment only.
Let's move on to the presidential race.
And there was a Democratic presidential debate last night, and you looked at some head-to-head matchups.
That's right.
President Trump.
So on the general election, there too there's been a shift in President Trump's favor. Last month, Democrats were a little bit ahead, mostly inside the margin of error. This month, Trump is a little bit ahead, mostly inside the margin of error. One of the bigger moves was Joe Biden, who moved from 6 points ahead to Trump ahead by 3 against Biden. So that's a 9-point big move. It's smaller for Sanders, from Sanders 2 ahead to Sanders 3 behind. Warren from 1 ahead to 5 behind. And Pete Buttigieg, who had been 2 points behind Trump a month ago, is 8 points behind in this poll. We also asked a half of the sample about Amy Klobuchar, who was trailing by about 14, and Cory Booker, who was actually leading by 1 point. But that is a half sample with a big margin of error, and we don't see other evidence in the poll that Booker is surging. On the other hand, that's a good showing for him, and almost surely deserves a full sample test next time.
Does it surprise you that it flipped like that?
I think that, and this was one of the things Nancy Pelosi had warned about on impeachment, that it does rally the other side. Republicans would be expected to rally around the president. Now, the question is the cumulative weight of the evidence something that ultimately undermines support among Republicans? And I really think the stronger evidence that we've seen this week needs time to circulate, percolate through, and see where we are in a couple of weeks after the testimony ends, and people have had time to think about it. Do we actually see a move?
It was much stronger testimony this week than last.
I think that's right. It went more directly to some of the questions. We asked last time, did Trump ask for an investigation? 51% said he did. But we also asked, did he withhold military aid in order to pressure Ukraine to do the investigation? Only 41% said he had done that. We had direct evidence this week on the withholding military aid. Does that testimony change anybody's mind? both whether he did it, but then the follow-on question, was this a serious thing or not wrong at all? And we're about evenly divided on whether it was wrong and serious or not wrong at all.
Divided as ever.
As ever.
And the whole country.
Yep.
All right. Well, have a nice Thanksgiving. Take a little break from this.
Yeah. Sometime during dinner on Thursday.
All right, Charles. Thanks for coming in.
Great to see you,
Thank you.
Charles.
We'll be right back with a final check your forecast.
Everybody roll playback. 3,